In this episode of Late Night Levitations, we'd like to show you a different version of diamagnetic suspension levitation. Normally this is done in the vertical axis. The experiment we're going to show you tonight is done with two pieces of pyrolytic graphite most of the time, and to power the lift we're using two sets of large ferrite magnet rings. This experiment can be scaled down. You can use smaller and thinner pieces of graphite, and you can also use smaller ferrite magnets, or you can use rare earth magnets for the lifting force. These rings are about 150 millimeters in diameter, and they're industrial grade, but you can harvest magnets like this out of old stereo speakers. Anyway, we'll start off by accelerating this at high speed. We also recommend that if you do any of these kind of experiments, rotating magnets up to high speeds, you put up a plastic shield or wear safety glasses, as we are in this case. This is an 8mm sphere magnet. As you can see, it's pretty stable. This is an 8mm side magnetized disc magnet. I'll just put some air to it and see what we get. Seems to spin alright, but it's not very stable. This experiment also works with just one piece of pyrolytic graphite. It's same setup. It's a little bit like the megalith from 2010. And the magnet being levitated this time is about 5 by 5 millimeters square. I'll put the camera in a fixed position and I'll add another magnet and see what happens. Seems to work well with two, but the gap has to be a little bit smaller for it to work. I'll add another one and see what happens. Well, I've added another one. The levitation gap has gotten a little bit smaller, but it still seems to work. I'll add another one and see what happens. Now, I've managed to get 4 to levitate, but only just. In this levitation, we've stacked 3 disc magnets together, and you can clearly see from the shot that we're showing that the gap between the magnet and the pyrolytic graphite is much greater. You find that with certain magnets and certain setups, you will get a much better result, either more stability or much larger levitation gaps. This is one of the setups that got us a much larger gap. The stability necessarily isn't there though, which we'll show in a second. For this one, we've put a rectangular magnet between the 2 plates of pyrolytic graphite. We'll just push it with some air and see what happens. This is the same rectangular magnet. It's basically been set so that it's poking up above the pyrolytic graphite plates. Not really tried this before, so I'll push it with some air and see what it does. A little different. This is an even larger rectangular magnet. It's very flat though. It's basically the same setup. In some of these setups I've had to move the ferrite ring magnets in or out a little bit depending on how high the magnet ends up between the blocks. If it ends up too high in the blocks, obviously you move the ferrite magnets apart. If it ends up too low in the blocks or on the bottom, then you obviously move the ferrite magnets closer together and it gives you more lift again. I don't think I'll try rotating the magnet that's between the blocks now. I don't think it will be stable enough for it. I'll just give it a nudge. Yeah, it's not very stable at all. In this setup, we've reduced the overall size and thickness of the pyrolytic graphite tile by half. We've also reduced the size of the ferrite ring magnets by about 2/3. The magnet being levitated is a 3mm rare earth element cube. We've done this one just to prove the point that you don't have to go out and buy large magnets or 2 pieces of pyrolytic graphite for that matter. And the rare earth magnets also these days are extremely cheap and very much mass produced and available all over the world. In this setup I've basically just put a 5mm cube magnet between the 2 graphite blocks. The lifting magnets being used this time are large 25mm cube magnets made out of 2 magnets, as can be seen. You can basically use rare earth magnets over ferrite magnets. I tend not to use them very much unless really required, as they obvious hazards and risks involved with magnets of that much strength. For this last setup I'm using 1 pyrolytic graphite block and 1 5mm cube magnet. I'll apply some air and see what happens. Whoop. This concludes another Late Night Levitations, production by AVA Magnetic Levitation Australia. If you'd like to obtain some pyrolytic graphite, just look up the information on the sidebar and contact us through eBay. We also sell polished bismuth plates and ready to levitate kits. None of our products require electricity to create the effects that you see in our videos. We hope to see you next time. This is Adam signing off. AVA Magnetic Levitation Australia confesses that some magnets were damaged or destroyed in the making of this production.